3 nights in the heart of the earth. So remember that. Just remember that. So I'm going to read it again. Matthew 12, verse 40. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. But how can we fit, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth between a Friday afternoon crucifixion and a Sunday morning resurrection? The traditional view of the crucifixion and resurrection allows for Jesus to have been entombed for only a day and a half. Some try to reconcile Christ's words with their belief in a Friday crucifixion and Sunday resurrection by rationalizing that Christ's 3 days and 3 nights statement does not require a literal span of 72 hours. They reason that a part of a day can be reckoned as a whole day. Hence, since Jesus died in the afternoon around the 9th hour after daybreak, or about 3 p.m. That account is found in Matthew 27, verses 46 through 50. So they think the remainder of Friday constituted the first day. Saturday would be the second, and part of Sunday the third. However, they failed to take into consideration that only 2 nights, Friday night and Saturday night, are accounted for in this particular theory or explanation. After all, the Bible is clear that Jesus had already risen before the daylight portion of Sunday. And this account is found at John 21. Something is obviously incorrect in this common conclusion, theory, or assumption regarding when Christ was actually in the tomb. Now, at Jonah 1:17, to which Christ referred, states specifically that Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days, 3 nights. We have no reason to think these days and nights were fractional, nor is there any basis for thinking that Jesus meant only 2 nights and 1 day, plus parts of 2 days, when he foretold the length of time he would be in the grave. Such rationalization actually undermines the integrity of his words. Alright, so the next question is, was Christ's sign fulfilled? If Jesus were in the tomb only from late Friday afternoon to sometime early Sunday morning, then the sign he gave that he was the prophesied Messiah was not fulfilled, if we're going by that, okay? The claim of his messiahship, if you will, rests on the fulfillment of his words. And it's that serious a matter. Now, let us carefully examine the details of those fateful days, okay? Each of the gospel writers gives an account of the events, but each presents different aspects that need to be correctly synchronized and harmonized to produce a clear sequence and understanding of actually what happened. We will see that when each account is considered, the chronological details, they actually mesh perfectly. Now, for instance, John 19:31 preserves a crucial point that provides insight into the other narratives. The preparation day on which Jesus was crucified is described as the day before, the Sabbath. But John clarifies it as by stating that this approaching Sabbath was a high day. Okay, so this does not refer to the weekly Sabbath, which is Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, but to the first day of unleavened bread, which is one of God's annual high or Sabbath days, which could and usually did fall on other days of the week. And there are references about this at Exodus 12:16 and 17, as well as Leviticus 23:6 and 7. Okay, so some believe that this high day fell that year on the 7th day of the week, making it coincide with the weekly Sabbath, with the preparation day being on Friday. But Luke's account shows that this was not the case. Notice the sequence of events outlined in Luke 23. Now, Jesus' moment of death, as well as his hasty burial because of the oncoming Sabbath, is narrated in verses 46 through 53. Verse 54 then states, that day was the preparation and the Sabbath drew near. Okay. So many have assumed that it is the weekly Sabbath mentioned here, but that's incorrect. Okay. Instead, it was a Sabbath that occurred on a Thursday. Since at verse 56 it shows that the women, after seeing Christ's body being laid in the tomb, returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils for the final preparation of his body. Now, such work would not have been done on a Sabbath, if we really think about it, okay, on a Sabbath day, since it would have been, Sabbath is holy, right? It would have been considered a Sabbath violation. This is further verified by Mark's account, which states, now when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome, bought spices which they would not have purchased on the high day Sabbath, okay, that they may come and anoint him. This is found in Mark 16:1. The women had to wait, okay, until this Sabbath was over before they could buy and prepare the spices to be used for anointing Jesus' body. Then, as Luke 23:56 says, it was after purchasing and preparing the spices and oils on Friday that they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment. Now, this second Sabbath mentioned in the Gospel accounts is the regular weekly Sabbath, observed from Friday sunset, okay, through Saturday sunset. Now, by comparing details in both Gospels, where Mark tells us the women bought the spices after the Sabbath, and Luke relates that they prepared the spices and then rested on the Sabbath, we can clearly see that two different Sabbaths are mentioned. Now, the first was a high day, okay, referred at John 19:31, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which in the year AD 31 fell on a Thursday. The second was the weekly 7th day Sabbath, okay? So, after the women rested on the regular weekly Sabbath, they went to Jesus' tomb early on the first day of the week, Sunday, while it was still dark. This reference is at John 21, and found that he had already been resurrected. That's found at Matthew 28:1-6, Mark 16:2-6, and Luke 24:1-3. So when we allow scriptures to interpret themselves, all four gospel accounts accurately harmonize and attest to the validity of Jesus' promise that he would be in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, not just part of that time. Now, several Bible translations recognize that more than one Sabbath is discussed in these events. Now, in Matthew 28:1, some Bible versions, including Alfred Marshall's Parallel New Testament in Greek and English, Farrar Fenton's translation, and Green's literal translation, properly translate this phrase as after the Sabbaths. Now, the Young's literal translation and the Complete Word Study Dictionary, New Testament, similarly acknowledge that multiple Sabbaths are intended here. Now, the wording of Mark 16:1-2 is confusing to some because it seems to suggest that the spices were purchased after the weekly Sabbath rather than before it, okay, on Friday, okay. However, this is explained by Luke 26 56.